Hello and welcome to So What You're Saying Is. I'm Peter Whittle. Now my guest today is someone that I know well because I've worked beside him for the past 4 years. David Kurten, Assembly Member, London Assembly Member, and also leader of the newly launched Heritage Party is with me today. I'm delighted he's here. Thanks for coming, David.
Really nice to be here. I hope you're not going to give me too hard a grilling like you do to Sadiq Khan.
I promise. No, it's slightly surreal, isn't it? But I just want to start actually, being quite sort of up to the minute. We both go to this thing called Mayor's Question Time, and the last one, which was last week, you asked the mayor, you stumped the mayor quite good and proper. Can you explain what happened, actually?
Yeah, well, I've been to some of these freedom rallies which have been going on in Trafalgar Square because there's a lot of people who are against the COVID restrictions, so that's what they're about. But there's been so many protests over the last few months in London. So I was asking the mayor about this because there have been very, very different policing strategies at different protests. So you've seen Black Lives Matter protests, Extinction Rebellion protests, where the police have seemed to be taking a softly approach. But when there was the freedom rallies, you had columns of riot police going in, breaking up the crowd, trying to close them down, and they were absolutely peaceful. And I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. The police acting in that way against the crowd. So I needed to ask the mayor about this and to see why this was happening, because there are things happening with policing in London which I think really should not be happening, and that have been very, very shocking to a lot of people.
But what was the response?
He didn't have an answer. He really didn't have much of an answer at all. He said something at the beginning about gold commanders and silver commanders and so on, but I asked him about his tweets, because he put out a tweet during the Freedom Rally on the 26th of September when I was there, saying this is unacceptable, everyone needs to go home. But he put out another tweet about the BLM rally on the 6th of June saying, I stand with you and I share your pain. So very, very different messaging from the mayor about two different rallies. And he didn't have a good answer. And then I asked him later on about last weekend. There were two Muslim rallies for Ashura and Arba'in, where over 3,000 Shia Muslims gathered in Marble Arch, both on Saturday and Sunday, and went marching off from there. So if the mayor was consistent and he's saying, you know, I don't want this freedom rally to take place, surely he would have also said, I don't want these rallies for Arba'in and Ashura taking place as well. But again, he didn't have a good answer, and he said to me, well, this is ridiculous that you're asking these questions. But I don't think it's ridiculous at all, because he's the mayor, he's the police and crime commissioner, so he should have a handle on what's going on in London, particularly the big events that are going on. So this is something that's very, very concerning, that we've got inconsistency in the policing, and you've got the mayor saying something, but then what he's saying is completely inconsistent. So nobody really knows what the situation is, what you can do and what you can't do, what the police will give a green light to and what the police will give a red light to. And so you can't live in London like that.
But the thing is that it seems glaringly obvious to me now, and it must do to the public looking in and say, well, actually, some are getting preferred treatment. Simple as that, surely?
Exactly, that's what it is. And, you know, we've seen that all the way through with, if you've got a cause, it seems like those causes that the mayor supports, Black Lives Matter, for example, because he's all over this with the critical race theory and so on. It seems that the police are going to go softly, but then if you are protesting against something that the mayor doesn't like, then the police are going to go in hard with the riot police even. So we've got political policing, and that's a very, very dangerous thing.
That's terrible. You spoke at, as you say, one of the rallies, or more than one?
I spoke at one of the rallies. I spoke at the one on the 19th of September, which was the second of three in Trafalgar Square. And I gave a speech there. My point was basically that the lockdown measures have been so destructive to civil liberties. They've been destructive to businesses, particularly small businesses and pubs and theatres and nightclubs, music venues, and they've also been very destructive to mental health, and as well as the awful situation of do not resuscitate orders being given in care homes. Well, in some of the care homes, you have these do not resuscitate orders are given to some elderly people. They put a form in front of an elderly person. They might not know what it is. They say, sign this, and it's an order that says, it's a piece of paper that basically says, if you get COVID, if you get severe symptoms, do not resuscitate. So basically leave them to die. If they actually find themselves in a situation where they're in intensive care on an incubator, just leave them to die if there is that situation where the NHS is overwhelmed. And I think that's an appalling way to treat older people in care homes. But there's reports of this going on all over the country.
But this is but you see, it's not really. Does that get through to the mainstream media?
No, I think the mainstream media are pushing a narrative, and they seem to be completely behind these lockdown measures, and they are over egging this so much. I mean, they're using so much hyperbole about this. I mean, there are more positive tests, but they're conflating positive tests with cases. So there are not cases with symptoms in as high a number, anywhere near as high a numbers as the positive tests. We can see clearly from the maths and the statistics that this is no more serious than a bad flu season. Yes, it is serious, but there are a lot of people who are getting ill, tens of thousands, but it's not hundreds of thousands, it's not millions, it's not the Black Death. And so all of these measures are completely unnecessary. I think we should be treating it as we would treat a flu season. So yes, you need to make sure you look after people who will be susceptible to it, but not have all of these very, very draconian restrictions on individuals and businesses. And I think the media is completely against anyone who says that. They're pushing, they're ramping up fear, and there's a lot of lies, I would say. I would use language as strong as this, that there are lies being told about the figures and the numbers which are going on, because they're presenting data in a certain way which is not accurate. And I think a lot of people in politics and the mainstream media have a very, very poor understanding of science and maths. That's part of it, and so they just, someone tells them something and they repeat it and parrot it. But if you can look into it, you can really see that this is way, way overblown, and it's so destructive and unnecessary. Because
I should say you are a scientist, actually, aren't you?
Yeah, I have a degree in chemistry, and a master's degree in chemistry as well. I was a chemistry teacher for 20 years or so I've got a strong science background. So the other day someone tweeted at me, "You're not a scientist, so shut up." And I said, "Yes, I am, and I'll say what I want." So, and they didn't have a response to that.
But if this is the case, you say the media are putting the frighteners on people, but then there's this hugely overblown reaction. Why? Why do you think?
I think there's a lot of different levels to this. I mean, I think there are some people who are going to make a lot of money out of this, particularly people who've got investments in vaccine companies, because look at how many doses of vaccines the government has already ordered, 200 million or something. I don't know what the price of those are, but even if they're £10 a dose, that's £2 billion which have gone into big pharma. So some people are making a lot of money. If small businesses close down, then that gives extra market share for big businesses to come in and take over when things eventually open up again. But I think there are some people who would like to put in some kind of control net. You see this already in the pubs. When you go into a pub, you have to, they like you to tap your phone in and get this track and trace app, so then the government can see where you are at all times, and so on. And they're talking about a new normal now. I mean, at the beginning, people said this is something that they're going to bring in, the new normal, the Great Reset, and they were called conspiracy theorists. But now it's out in the open. You've got the World Economic Forum talking about a Great Reset and bringing in certain technology which we haven't had before. To go with this, so for example, you have to book in to go to a pub or something. So we will lose freedom. Governments like to take away freedom, but they don't give it back very, very easily. And we had 2 weeks to save the NHS in March, and here we are 29 weeks later, and they're taking more and more and more freedoms and civil liberties away from us.
When they started this in March, right, I think it was March 23rd, wasn't it, when the lockdown thing? Apparently, there is the view that there was this weekend where the government were effectively going the right way to begin with, and then they utterly panicked and went the wrong way. Do you think that they were going the right way originally?
I think originally they were at the beginning of March, because you had the chief medical and scientific officers. They were up there and they were talking about herd immunity, and we have seen a couple of countries that have gone down that route. Particularly Sweden is well known for that. They haven't been any worse off than we have in this country in terms of statistics and epidemiology, or any other country that's introduced a harsh lockdown like Italy or Spain or Belgium. So you can see clearly now different countries that have followed different paths. There's been very, very little difference in how the course of the virus and the epidemic has gone. So I think that now time has shown, now we've got 6 or 7 months of real data that actually shows that going down the path of herd immunity would have been the right path to take. What they've got to do now is just step back and say, look, we were wrong. Okay, let's now go down the Swedish route and do that. But it doesn't look like anyone in this country is going to do that.
It seems to be sort of like a land of confusion. I mean, it is hard to actually keep up with what you can and cannot do. But on top of that, there is I feel what really affects me is this real surreal quality and atmosphere now. And you talked about mental health. And I think that has a very deleterious effect on people, doesn't it? I mean, I'm in London most of the time. And it's still like a ghost town, isn't it?
Oh, it's awful. I mean, you just think, well, what on earth is going on here? I mean, London is dead, central London particularly, and things that life how it was, you just expect London to be a place that's full of life and full of joy and full of excitement and interest, where you can go and see your friends and so on, and it's not like that anymore. It's not just London, it's everywhere in the country, and other countries as well. But the measures that they're bringing in now here in London and other places, Lancashire, Essex and so on, where you can't go and see friends from a different house, not even in a pub or a restaurant, are going to be appalling for mental health. I mean, what do they expect us to do? Just stay in our homes on our own and have Zoom conversations with everyone all the time? I mean, this is not normal living. I mean, this is the new normal that they're talking about, which is it's a dystopian nightmare, and we need to stand up and say we're not having it. Basically.
It is one of these things, isn't it, where I don't really come across anyone who is like really gung-ho for all these measures. But when you look at the polls, they all seem to say 63% of people behind the government, 40% think the government aren't doing enough. And yet, I sort of think to myself, well, maybe this was what it was a bit like to be a Remainer. In the sense that the only people that you ever sort of saw and spoke to would have been fellow Remainers. So who are these Brexiteers? Do you think that's the right analysis or not?
I do. I don't know who's doing these polls, to be honest, but they really don't seem right to me. But we know from the last 4 or 5 years that there's been so many polls that have just been wrong. Like you mentioned Brexit. I mean, right up to Brexit Day, polls were saying Remain's going to win. We decided and voted to come out of the EU. Again in 2016, the polls were saying Hillary Clinton's going to win. On the night, she had a 98% probability of winning, and Trump won. In the elections we've had in 2017, 2019, the polls were wrong again. So I think sometimes these polls are being used as a tool of propaganda, to be honest, because most people I know and talk to are really, really against these lockdown measures. They're really concerned about the effect it's having particularly on businesses and the economy, because if you don't have a good economy, then no one's going to have any money, no one's going to be paying any taxes, and that's going to, in the long run, feed into healthcare as well. So you're not going to save healthcare, you're going to destroy it. So it's almost like burning down the village to save it, which this is what's happening, and it's absolutely balmy.
But, I mean, we're both at City Hall. As you mentioned, we've been at City Hall since 2016, and we now have something called the Brexit Alliance, right? But we're both actually technically independents, aren't we?
Yes.
Really, sometimes it seems that City Hall is the mothership of this whole thing, doesn't it? I mean, when you say, what is your, I mean, you know, obviously you've been there for 4 years, I've been there for 4 years, then now we've been, as it were, superannuated, haven't we, because they postponed the election. What's your view of the place?
It's like walking through treacle when you go in there. It is like politically correct central. I mean, it's a joyless place, honestly. I mean, it's all nice and shiny, and people are superficially nice to you. Do you know, the people I get on most, the people I really do like, are the security guards. Because they're real, genuine people, you know, and they talk to us and they kind of think like normal working people. That says a lot, doesn't it? You get on with the security guards, but you find, you know, that sort of political staff and people there are just absolutely joyless, and they all think in the same way. I mean, they bang on about diversity of skin colour, diversity of this and that, but they all think in exactly the same way, which is politically correct and woke, and you know, they talk about intersectionality and social justice and all of these things, and they're very, very down on Britain, you know. Britain's a wonderful country where everyone can get on, you know, there's opportunity for all, but you have this dour kind of mindset there that they think that Britain is an awful place to be, and they systemically racist and transphobic and homophobic and misogynistic and Islamophobic and xenophobic and every other phobia you can like, and it needs to be burned down and built up again as something else. I mean, that this is the kind of mindset that pervades the people in City Hall. And we go in, I mean, our little office area, it's kind of an oasis of fun. You know,
well, not anymore, because everything's remote now, isn't it? But, you know, I mean, no, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, what do you make of Khan now after, you know, we've both sort of challenged him, but I mean, you challenge him on things, and obviously, you know, he's there now for, you know, another year. What's your impression?
Well, I think two things about him, honestly. I think Sadiq Khan cares primarily about Sadiq Khan, and I think he'll swing whichever way as the wind blows in order to get votes from his audience, from his base, and so he's completely on board of all the sort of progressive agenda and so on. But that's the second thing. I think he is committed to the progressive globalist agenda. So he's again, yesterday he started to call for an extension to leaving the EU. He said that we want another 12-month extension because of COVID. And, you know, I also asked him yesterday about that, and I said, you know, it's absolutely wrong to use COVID to try and extend staying in the EU, well, the single market and customs union anymore. So he's definitely committed to that. He's committed to all the green agenda as well, and this is something that on a ground level, on a grassroots level, people are up in arms about all over London, as well as other places in the country, where they're putting in all of these pop-up bicycle lanes and road barriers everywhere to sort of prevent people from driving their cars around, because he keeps talking about walking and cycling. Now, I've got nothing against walking and cycling, they're great, but we want people to be able to do more than just walk and cycle, and people and individuals and businesses have got to be able to use their cars and vehicles to get around and carrying on doing business as normal. So, but this seems to be something that is wider than just, you know, Sadiq Khan. The Tory government are completely bought into this sort of green agenda, and you have other people around the world that are pushing it as well, but it's not particularly green. To be honest, it's just I think that's a very good marketing name, but its effects are quite destructive to life, everyday life for people.
But isn't it sort of like, it's more, they call them, don't they? They used to call them watermelons, i.e. that they were actually red. They were sort of basically Marxist. And if you think of the Greens that we both know, they actually are to the left actually of Labour, really, aren't they?
Pretty much. I mean, they're like Corbynites, basically. Corbynites plus, to be honest. I mean, full-on Marxists. I mean, you had the original Greens, I suppose. I mean, people think of the Green. It's a brilliant marketing name, because you look at it and you think, oh, this is about trees and so on. It's about looking after the countryside. But they look at their policies, and it's anything but. They want to turn agricultural land into solar farms. They want mass immigration. They're into every latest progressive ideology. They want transgenderism taught in schools. They want gender identity brought in, which, that's one thing that I do think the Tory government have got right after a lot of pressure, that they've pulled back from introducing sort of gender identity, self-identity. That's it. In instantaneous self-identity. At the moment, you have to wait for 2 years, but and all these kind of things. So the Greens, the Green Party, are all over anything that is the latest woke ideology, the latest political correct fashion. They'll jump all over it, and Sadiq Khan does, but I think the Greens do with even more fervour. So as well as all the climate alarmism, which again doesn't stack up in terms of science either.
Now, so while we're on City Hall, you're going to be standing for the mayoralty next year, aren't you? So and you've launched a party called the Heritage Party.
Yes.
I said, why did you decide to stand for mayor? It's sort of like, I know it's a stupid question, but yeah, I mean, what do you think you can bring to it then?
Well, it's been good being on the Assembly. I mean, even though it's been tough facing the sort of politically correct chamber whenever I go in there, it's been wonderful to stand up for common sense, basically, and just to bring that. And I think it gives people hope that there is someone in there who will stand up to the political correctness and so on. So I want to carry on doing that if I can do. And I'm standing not just for the mayor but for the Assembly as well. So having the Heritage Party will be very, very good for that, because I can put a list together to stand in the London Assembly elections as well as just being an independent, and then I can also stand for the mayor, of course, for a party.
So I should explain actually to people the way it works in the London Assembly is that there's a list for we are both what you call over London-wide members, and then there are constituency members. So different. So the Heritage Party would be standing for the list being the London-wide. Is that right?
That's right. It's a proportional representation system, which is unusual in this country, but you have it in London and Wales and Scotland as well. So, to get onto the Assembly, I think it's 5%. You get a seat on the Assembly on the proportional part. It's much harder to get into being the mayor, obviously, because there's only one person can do it. My profile is going up, is being raised slowly and steadily. So by the time we get to the elections in 6 months, I hope 1 or 2 million people have heard of me, and not just that, they'll like me and vote for me as well. Please, that would be nice. But if I don't get in as mayor, I mean, I really hope I can, because I just want to bring common sense back to London and overturn all the crazy traffic measures and end the political correctness in the police force and just get them back on target to doing what they should do, which is catching criminals. I mean, I want to do that. But even if I don't get in as mayor, I hope that I will still be able to get back on the Assembly as well. So then, I can build up from there and have a go next time after. And we need someone to carry on doing that, because as much as I like some of the GLA Tories, they won't talk about the stuff that we talk about, I don't think.
It's marked, isn't it, how they don't. Not only do they not talk really about it, but also they tend not to lend their support, I found as well, don't they? Just stay away, don't they, from certain topics.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about a lot of the cultural issues. I mean, we were asked, yesterday, I could ask them about the Shia Muslim marches. I asked them about the grooming gangs. You've asked them about grooming gangs and so on as well before in different scenarios, which, you know, I think obviously this is happening in London. If it's happening in Manchester and Birmingham and Newcastle and Bristol, it's going to be happening in London. But no one wants to talk about that apart from us. But, you know, some of them will come and say, oh, we love your questions, but won't say anything about it themselves because they're scared to death of being called a name. You know, they're scared to death of being called xenophobic or bigoted or whatever. So, you know, that's what a real Conservative Party should be doing. They should be conservative, but they're not. You know, I don't know what they are. There's this nebulous sort of jelly-like thing that doesn't actually, you know, have any kind of solidity to it.
So the Heritage Party is basically a thoroughgoing Conservative Party.
Exactly.
Is that what you would say?
It's what I want it to be. It's set up as a socially conservative party. So it would be economically conservative, I guess, maybe not quite so neoliberal as the Tory party. I mean, I would say we believe in free markets, but we want fair markets as well. So we've got some economic policies, but it specifically is to be a conservative party and socially conservative as well. So we are standing for defending our heritage and culture, traditional family values, low immigration. We're going to be pro-life, fair markets, as I say, free and fair markets, and self-sufficiency in skills and national sovereignty. So all of those things, you can see our manifesto on the website. There's all those things there, headlines, and you can read a little bit more about those things. But those are all the positions that, you know, the Conservative Party would have maybe taken 30 or 40 years ago. But now they've moved so far towards the progressive left, they don't represent conservatism anymore. So we need something to do that, and so that's why I've set up the Heritage Party, because there's a huge void in politics for sort of the centre to mid-right, you know, socially conservative area, and there's no one representing that. But I think there's millions of people who are crying out for a party like that, and I want to represent people who just want to restore that kind of common sense conservatism to the country.
Where do your politics come from, in the sense that when were you first interested really in it? I mean, when were you ever? Obviously, we were both in UKIP, you know. But before that, were you in the Conservative Party, or were you in any party?
I was in the Conservative Party twice, actually. I mean, as a student, I joined. That was before UKIP existed. That was back in the times of Thatcher, and when Thatcher, you know, was removed and Major replaced her. So back then, and then I left. I wasn't, you know, I was in it as a student, but I didn't stay in it as a young man. Just, but then I joined also again, 2009, 2009, in the last days of Blair and Brown, because it was so suffocating, the atmosphere of this 13 years of Labour. I just wanted to do something to help, you know, get rid of them and get something else in, you know. And so I joined the Conservative Party then, sort of to help Cameron get in, but it was very quickly a very big disappointment. I mean, he was basically the heir to Blair. So I left after a year. I didn't stay in at all. But then I joined UKIP after that, for two reasons: because I was concerned about the direction the EU was going, and also I was very concerned about the political correctness. And UKIP seemed to be the only party that was represented both of those things. So it just made, you know, absolute sense to join.
But were you always interested in politics as a kid?
I was, I was always interested in current affairs and politics and so on, you know, and culture and how things are going. And you know, I'd hope that someday I would get involved in it. But I spent most of my 20s and 30s being a teacher. So
You were a teacher all over the place, weren't you? I mean, you were in New York, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. 2 years in New York, and a couple of years in Bosnia-Herzegovina, 2 years in Botswana, and a year in Bermuda as well. So it's all in lots of different places around the world.
Were you at schools or colleges, or what was it?
Schools, high schools. I mean, mainly teaching A-level, IB diploma level chemistry. So it was very nice to be in international schools in that circuit for a while. So I mean, I've seen so much and learned so much about the world. So I mean, it's a fantastic thing for me to have done that. But then I came back to UK after then, and got involved in politics and stood for the first time in 2015 elections.
We both did, didn't we?
That's
right.
You stood in Eltham and I stood in Camberwell and Peckham. Yeah, that's right.
Against Harriet Harman.
That's right.
You're not from London. Where are you from?
I'm from West Sussex. I'm from a village near Bognor Regis. That's where I grew up. I grew up with my mum and her two parents. Not my dad. My dad's Jamaican, but I never met him. So he was one of these things. He was left before I was born. So I was brought up with my mum, who was wonderful. She's a fantastic mum. Did everything she could for me. So that's where I was brought up. I moved to London the first time after university. I went to St Andrews University. Did chemistry there. When I'd finished my degree, I came to London 1993 for the first time. And I've been in and out ever since.
Yes.
I taught in schools around London, and but as well as teaching abroad as well. So, but this has been my base most of the time. So,
I'm a Londoner, and I look at it and think, at the moment, it does look like it's at death's door. I mean, do you think I'm being too pessimistic?
No, not at all. There are some sectors that have been totally destroyed from 6 months of them being closed. Theatres in the West End. I mean, it's not just the theatres that are affected. There's all the other industries that rely on the theatres being open to survive. Other restaurants and bars and props companies and so on. And there's people that just aren't around. People who would be coming to London, doing what they do, meeting each other, bringing life to the place, and they're just not coming. And that's the West End, and you've got the City, and you've got Canary Wharf. The offices are closed. People are working at home. Many of them are losing their jobs as well because there's less for them to do. So the city is dead, and you wonder, when's it going to come back? Because they're now talking about 6 more months of lockdown or on and off lockdowns. A couple of weeks on, couple of weeks off. Who knows how it's going to go? And I wonder if London's going to survive that. But it's not just London; it's other cities as well. I mean, look what they've done to Liverpool. It's the same there. So this is awful, and it's all unnecessary. It's a crime, I think.
Are you going to be speaking at any of the upcoming rally? This is we're at nearly at the end of October now. Are there any other things planned in November, say, or do you know where you might be speaking? Or?
Well, I'm not sure I'll be speaking at any more rallies in London, because there were some rallies in Trafalgar Square where people were gathered specifically with a stage and so on. I don't know if there's any more of those things planned. I mean, there's one on Saturday which is a march more, so I don't think there's going to be people speaking there. But last weekend I went to Berlin. And I spoke at the inaugural session of the World Doctors Alliance, which was fantastic. So,
and what is that, David?
Well, in London, on the 26th of September at the march, there was a very, very well-renowned German doctor called Dr. Heiko Schöning. He spoke in Trafalgar Square, and the police closed down the rally as he was speaking. Then a few people went up to Speaker's Corner later on. He spoke again there, and the police arrested him and held him for nearly a day, and he was released. But he's the chair of the World Doctors Alliance, which is an alliance of doctors who are all using evidence to counter the government mainstream media narratives on coronavirus. So they're looking at the facts, saying this is no worse than a bad flu season. We shouldn't be having all of these measures putting in place, and they're setting up sort of, I suppose, groups in various places. They had a doctor from the Netherlands who spoke as well. I'm from the UK and spoke there. So it was just a few people from different countries coming together to talk about this. And so I think I might do more things like that. With maybe indoors with a panel and so on to talk about this. But I mean, this has gone viral on social media.
Right, okay.
I think a lot of people have seen these videos that we put out from the weekend in Berlin. So so I may do more of that in the future. We'll see how things go.
Well, look, I mean, when it comes to the Heritage Party, you mentioned we can put a link, obviously, under the interview that goes out. It's heritageparty.org. Just heritageparty.org. And so people can go on there and register their support?
Yeah, you can sign up to get our newsletter, you can volunteer, and you can read our manifesto. It's not open for membership yet because we've applied to the Electoral Commission, but we haven't got approval yet.
Well, that takes forever, doesn't it?
It's taking a long time. I'm hoping we'll get approval in November, and when we do, we'll open it up for membership and you can join, and then we'll be setting up branches and so on so that we can select candidates to stand hopefully in local elections come May.
Of course, in May. This is the thing. There's the outside chances or not that these might be postponed, do you think? Or is that really going to happen?
I'm starting to hear under the surface, people are starting to say, the elections might be postponed again. And I don't know. But, I'm starting to hear that. So we've really just got to play it by ear.
You've got to be ready, haven't you?
You would do, yes.
Thank you very much, David, for coming in. It's lovely to speak to you. See you next week in the chamber.
Yes, we'll do. I know.
It's a bit chummy, that, wasn't it? Anyway, thanks, David. We will see you again next week. Thanks very much for watching. And please do remember, won't you, to subscribe. Thanks so much.